troops begin going house to house, shooting every inhabitant they find. The old, the infirmed, women, children, all were gunned down. Major hospitals under Polish control, and they execute every wounded soldier.
Fuck. These people are wicked. Hey love, welcome back again. Today we are going to be checking out the Warsaw Uprising, the unstoppable spirit of the Polish resistance, extra history. If you're new here, please make sure you like, subscribe, and let's get right into today's reaction.
5 years. Execution, torture, and vicious oppression has been the fate of the Poles. But resistance, the will to fight the Nazis who occupy their homeland, has been kept alive. In the face of unspeakable brutality, the Polish Home Army, the volunteer force of resistance fighters secretly living in Poland, has continued to grow. For these fighters, discovery meant instant death. But with sabotage, indirection, and a message of hope for the people, they kept the Germans from ever feeling secure in occupied Poland. And now it was time. Russian shelling could be heard in the streets of Warsaw. Liberation was at hand. But the Home Army wasn't going to wait for the Russians to march into their capital and return to them whatever portion of their country they felt generous enough to give.
Like whatever part of their country they felt generous to give, like someone else's country. I think I'm listening to, I think they're Unconquered, and I was meant to understand in the video that at the point Germany and Russia like invaded Poland, should I say attacked Poland at the same time? That's cruel. Whoa.
The Warsaw Uprising was about to begin.
Whoa. Extra history.
A few months ago, James was invited to Poland to attend one of their massive game jams and observe what they're doing to help grow the games industry there. With any luck, he'll get back there for their game jam in September, and I'll be hiding in his luggage to go visit my homeland. Because while in Warsaw, he fell in love with the city and its history. So much so that he worked with the folks running the game jam to help sponsor this special episode so he could talk about one of the greatest tragedies of the 20th century. So, let's begin. August 1st, 1944. The Allies have landed in Normandy. Rome has fallen, and the Soviets have pushed the German war machine off Russian soil. And in Warsaw, a people oppressed for 5 long years are about to rise up against their oppressors. But what precipitates this is the approach of the Soviet army, because the history between the Soviets and Poland is a fraught one. In 1939, as allies of Hitler, Soviet forces stormed over the Polish border, taking Poland by surprise and collapsing Polish defenses. Up to that point, while not winning the war against Germany, the Polish army was taking their toll, slowing down German forces and making them pay for every inch of ground. But to do this, almost all of their forces were sent to the west, never expecting an attack from the supposedly neutral Soviet Union. When Soviet forces poured over the eastern border, it spelt the end for the Polish army. 2 weeks later, Poland would surrender, and more than half would be annexed by the Soviet Union until they in turn lost it to the Nazis, double-crossing them. And while not as systematically brutal as Nazi occupation, the Soviet domination of Poland was still horrific. They rounded up and shot 22,000 Poles in the Katyn forest. And even when they...
How can you shoot 22,000 people? 22,000 lives? That's bad.
And when they joined the Allies, they refused to acknowledge the legitimacy of the Polish government in exile. All of which means that many in the Polish resistance believed that the only way they'd have a seat at the table after the war is if they liberated their own country. Which leads us back to the 1st of August. The Russians are a few dozen kilometers away. As their advance continues, the Germans are guaranteed to fall. It's now or never. It's time to rise up. The previous night, a tense meeting had occurred, and W hour, the start of the Polish uprising, was declared. The troops had trained for a surprise attack at dawn, but at the last minute, plans changed. The uprising was now set for 5 p.m. But it's hard to hide that many people spoiling for a fight, and by 5 p.m., sporadic engagements had already broken out across the city. The Polish troops were barely armed, many without weapons at all. Charging in with homemade submachine guns or captured German rifles, they took the gasworks, the power and water plants, and some vital production facilities. but they were repulsed in key locations as well. The bridges, the airport, the rail line, and the main police station all remained in German hands. Most crucially, though, they failed to link up. By night, groups were erecting barricades. The city was now divided, and though there would be some coordination and reinforcement, many pockets were now fighting in their own small wars.
Gosh.
Then the bombs begin to fall. The Luftwaffe is laying waste to the city, not differentiating between civilian areas and those controlled by the resistance. The Polish Home Army doesn't have a single anti-aircraft gun.
What?
And all eyes look for signs of the Soviet Air Force, but no planes sporting the Red Star of Russia are anywhere to be seen. 4 days into the uprising, the true atrocities start. On orders of Heinrich Himmler, German troops begin going house to house, shooting every inhabitant they find. The old, the infirmed, women, children, all were gunned down.
Gosh. That's really cruel. Like house to kill people regardless of being old, being young, regardless of the gen. And this is their country to even start with. This is their home. That's so bad. Like, really.
Over the course of a week, tens of thousands of civilians are murdered as they huddled in their homes. But the Polish resistance didn't break. The Home Army ground the Germans to a halt, though its strongest battalions were also its most tragic, the Grey Ranks. They were made up of the Boy Scouts. Older scouts were frontline troops, better organized, better trained, better disciplined than most of the volunteers. The younger members ran courier duty, while the Girl Scouts served as combat medics, nurses, and munition haulers. And they all swore an oath. I pledge to you that I shall serve the Grey Ranks, safeguard the secrets of the organization, obey orders, and not hesitate to sacrifice my life. And they would hold this oath all the way unto their death. They fought house to house, door to door, in the chaotic melee of city fighting. Classmates died side by side, first loves torn apart by machine gun fire. They referred to each other as bees because they were a hive, a collective, and they would sting the Germans. They fought with the fury only possessed by the young and the righteous, and they pushed the Nazis from the burnt-out remains of the...
And the Germans actually did a lot. The Germans actually, they did really terrible things to these people. It's not nice. No, this is not nice in any way. It's not.
Warsaw Ghetto. They cut into the German line far enough to liberate one of the concentration camps.
Why this is going on, there's
384
something
Jews
called
who had survived the extermination of the ghetto were still imprisoned there, and they took up arms to fight against those who had enslaved them, who had murdered everyone they knew. But then, the young fighters of the Grey Ranks were faced with the unthinkable. Something I don't know as a human being you could face. German tanks rolled forward, but it wasn't the 100 tons of steel and death that stopped the scouts. They had faced tanks before, armed only with rifles and hand grenades. No, it was what was in front of the tanks, because in front of those tanks were women. Some burned or beaten, all Polish. The Nazis were using them as human shields. It was this the scouts couldn't face. So the advance turned to a stalemate, and still, aid did not come. By the end...
Oh, gosh. This is one of the cruelest things I've ever had. This is so cruel. This is sheer wickedness. Using those people as human shield.
End of August, the undersupplied Polish forces had to withdraw from Warsaw's Old Town, making their way through the sewers to more easily held points. For nearly a month, the soldiers and many of the civilians had been living off barley from a brewery the Grey Ranks had captured early in the fighting. Soon even water was scarce, with waterways clogged with corpses and Germans cutting off remaining water mains as they advanced. At last, on the 15th of September, Soviet forces appeared on the far banks of the Vistula. A crossing attempt is made, but Soviet command only sent the lightly armored division of Polish volunteers who had joined them after the fall of Poland to try to relieve Warsaw. Of the 1,600 men who went, more than 1,000 fell to German guns. The Soviets decide that a crossing was impractical, and no further attempt would be made to aid the Polish partisans. Meanwhile, America finally attempts an airdrop of supplies, but 80% of it is accidentally dropped behind German lines. American forces will not try again. The resistance is shelled day and night. Great mortars with shells 2 feet in diameter rain down on them. Rockets slam into the few remaining upright buildings, and tanks hammer away at foxholes for scouts armed with no more than rifles. The Germans advance on the Mokotów district. The resistance is pushed back. They enter one of the major hospitals under Polish control, and they execute every wounded soldier.
Fuck. These people are wicked. These people are demons on their own. Like, even going to the hospital, I'm sure it's not just only the wounded soldiers, even the doctors, the nurse, everybody was killed, everything was annihilated. Like, what more do they want?
Wounded soldier and all of the hospital's personnel. Again, the resistance flees through the sewers, but 150 of them exit too early and are killed by German troops. The Poles now control only a few square blocks right against the river. They were surrounded, starving, outgunned, and outnumbered. And yet, they fought. Not like bees, but like wasps. Every house was a stronghold, every doorway a bunker, and they fought within sight of the Soviet army across the river. Yet no aid came. They fought with the determination of the damned. They fought and fell. The outcome was inevitable. Surrender had to come. Germans wary of fighting and interested in concentrating on the Soviet threat offered terms. The entire population of Warsaw was to be expelled, but no one was to be executed. The terms were accepted. The resistance fighters spent their last days forging documents for the Jewish members among them. 15,000 of the home army were taken away as POWs, and 500,000 civilians were shipped out of the city. The lucky ones were simply let go, with no homes, no food, no jobs. But 60,000 ended up in the death camps, and 90,000 more found themselves unloaded at forced labor yards. And after the surrender, Himmler said, "The city must completely disappear from the surface of the earth, and serve only as a transport station for the Wehrmacht. No stone can remain standing. Every building must be razed to its foundation." And in one of the last great acts of senseless destruction perpetrated by the Nazi regime, German engineers took flamethrowers and dynamite, and systematically, building by building, block by block, wiped Warsaw off the map. By the time 3 months later, when the Russians finally crossed the Vistula, 85% of the buildings in Warsaw had been leveled. Monuments, schools, libraries, historical sites, all reduced to rubble and ash. If you go to the historic district of Warsaw today, what you're actually seeing is a reconstruction, an attempt to rebuild based on old photographs and paintings. If you walk the halls of the royal castle, you're not seeing a building that's been standing for 400 years. Instead, you walk through a palace completed in 1984. And in the rubble of that city lay 70% of the young people of the gray ranks. But their sacrifice was not forgotten, for their nation still stands, long after the 1,000-year Reich was wiped from the earth.
To be honest, right? I don't even know where to start from, because this is one of the cruelest videos I've seen so far. A lot of things, a lot of historical videos about Poland. But I feel like, no, this is far from being wicked. Wicked is understatement to what these people actually did to Poland. And at the end of the day, because when you look deep into at what cause any war is being fought, you will notice for selfish reasons, and the reasons aren't even justifiable. Like the whole city, it's just like trying to turn the whole world into a museum. Like you wreck a whole city, not just the building. Forget about the buildings and the library and the museums. You're talking about lives. Millions of people just because you want to make their habitants a train station. These people do not deserve hell. If there's somewhere more than hell, like they deserve to be in that. What? Like I can't freaking believe this. Oh God, this is wickedness. This is wickedness. This is wickedness. Mothers, kids, father, brother, whatever, being cut off, their life being. I will see you guys on my next one. Do not forget to like, subscribe to the channel. This is really overwhelming for me, like, to be honest. Oh.